Hello and welcome back to Breaking the Cycle. My name is Alan Hyde, and tonight we have a special guest. She is a local business owner in the Dallas area, and she is the founder of Everyday Assistant. Devan Ross, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. How are you doing?
I am wonderful. It has been a busy and productive week.
Yeah. So we were talking before, just kind of offline, about your business, Everyday Assistant. And before we get into kind of unpacking that and back into some of the conversations you and I were having, what kind of inspired you to get into the administrative side of the clinical world and working with us wacky therapists?
Yeah, of course. So I guess it all started in like high school when I found an interest in the psych field. I went to school, got my bachelor's degree, and through that I was working in the service industry primarily, and age of COVID hit, and I was still in the service industry with a psych degree. So I went looking for a job where I could use that and found a similar role within another company and kind of started learning the ropes, and I kind of took to it naturally. It makes my ADHD brain tingle in the right way.
Yeah. What were you doing in the service industry?
I was bartending.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Gotcha.
Similar to therapy.
Yeah,
No.
running into a lot of the clientele.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Bartending, serving, just working in a restaurant.
Yeah, and then you mentioned when you transitioned from the service industry, you started working with clinicians in their practices and different centers and things like that. Was that kind of a big inspiration as to starting the Everyday Assistant?
Absolutely. I will say the practice owners that I first started working for are who I'm working for now, and they've inspired me every step of the way and supported me, and it's been a really beautiful experience because I was new at this. I didn't know what I was doing, and I did require some guidance. But in no time, I was picking it up, and they were trusting me, and some really great relationships were formed out of it, which has taught me a lot. I've been shown a lot of patience, gratitude, understanding, and just a lot of things that I think the world needs a little bit more of. So including that in my day-to-day work life is really important to me.
Yeah. And you mentioned in your bio too that you had started pursuing an MSW, so you have a lot of passion for the field.
I do.
Do you think you'll get into the clinical side as well through this journey and adventure?
I do. I think right now the goal is to get my business into a point where I am able to step away so I can focus more on other projects. So yes, I do intend on finishing that program. It's just a matter of when. So I'm patient, and I'm okay with even putting this off for several more years, and I've considered retiring as a therapist, skipping that burnout.
Yeah. I was just talking with my therapist the other day of like this, working as a therapist is a career where, we sit and talk. You could do this as long as you want, and there really is something beautiful about that. And I think also the administrative work that you're doing too, you're helping us sort through all the stuff that makes us want to pull our hair out. And I can't thank you enough for doing a business like that on behalf of other therapists, because when I started my practice, if I didn't have an intermediary, I would have been lost.
I totally understand that. And something that I've also noticed, therapists are an underserved community because they are focused on helping others so much that they forget to help themselves. So that's an area that I hope to specialize in when I do finally get that degree.
Like working with therapists.
Yeah.
They're, when you get a therapist on your caseload, it's if they're ready to do the work and willing to do the work, they're the best clients. If they're willful, they can be some of the worst. But I'm sure some of the therapists that watch this, right, because a bunch of my friends watch it too, they're probably cracking up because we've all had to cross that bridge. But
no, I can understand that could probably pose a challenge in some cases when because I know for me personally, in my therapy, I catch myself like, I feel like I know too much. Like, I know what you're doing right now.
Yeah. So you spend a lot of the week putting fires out for us on the back end.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about just kind of what that looks like and how you handle it?
Yeah, so it could look a number of different ways. I support a lot of practices that foster the development of younger therapists. Okay. So there's a lot of oopsie moments in the beginning, as I'm sure you probably have had some of your own. We all, miss an appointment or forget about a consult, things like that. So when those things happen, people naturally get upset. And I, put out that fire. I help people get rescheduled. I help them get rematched with a different therapist if it doesn't feel like a good fit. Or let's say a therapist unexpectedly leaves a practice and their whole caseload needs to be redispersed. I've been that person who's talked to every single one of those clients, so I know what their concerns are. I have it all documented and tracked in a document that helps me recall this information, be like, oh, right, I remember what they reached out about. This other therapist would be an even better fit for them. This works out.
Yeah. So your everyday assistant, is there, I guess, to get a sense for them, in case we have therapists listening that they're looking for an assistant, an intermediary, do you help them with like documentation? Do you have a portal for that? Is it just the back end assistance? You're already shaking your head yes, so I'm assuming that's part of it. And then, so could you give us just kind of like a rundown of how your business structure is, and I'll just
absolutely
listen.
So I think it might be easy to just walk you through one of my days.
Yeah.
So generally, I get logged in at like 10 a.m. I have 7 different practices that I manage. So I have 7 different windows that I open to access each of their Gmail accounts, their respective Google Drives, and things like that. Also there, I will open up the screen for the EHR that goes with that practice. I'm sorry to interject. You interface with all like the different EHRs that they come with, so like Simple Practice and Kipu and things like that. Yeah, there's a few that I haven't worked with yet, but they're all pretty intuitive and function the same way for the most part. I'm actually helping one of my practice owners transition EHRs, which of course can be a bit daunting.
Sure.
But it's one of the things that that I do as well, in addition to the day-to-day client-facing sort of tasks. So I also have, a work phone that is set up for all of their lines to be forwarded to. So my phone will ring, I'm not going to talk about which practices I manage for the sake of their own privacy, but...
Do you want to plug that phone number right now? We'll do it at the end as well, just in case people listening the live want the phone number and then they're not on later.
Yeah, no, I'll actually, I'm happy to provide a number that people can contact me if they are interested in the type of services I provide. Absolutely.
Okay, and then we can get back into your day, but what is the number if they wanted to get in contact?
So that is 469-285-5416. And
real quick, Evan, do you think we could put that in like the Facebook chat? Do you have access to that right now? Yeah. Okay. We'll have you say it one more time so you can type it in there for him.
Let me know whenever you're ready. 469-285-5416.
So if you're listening live and you're a clinician, you mentioned you work with nutritionists, you're a psychiatrist, you're a life coach, right? Wherever you are working with clients, you need to document, you need someone to help you assist in client communications, all the stuff that comes flowing in while you're in your practice. Devan is your person. Her number is in the chat in the Facebook Live.
Absolutely. In addition to, client-facing things like doing consultations and gathering background information, helping them verify their insurance if that's relevant to that practice. I also do tasks like writing tasks like helping update websites or creating marketing materials for the practice, and also networking, which is one of my favorite tasks to do for the practices that I support.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise you. You were very just professional and on top of when I had reached out, and just the way you approached, and then we communicated about this.
Thank you.
The networking side of it, I was like, oh, she's got it down. She knows what she's doing.
Thanks. No,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I'll tell you, when I first started, it took me a little while to figure out how to make emails sound friendly, because they often come across as short, or you read it in a monotone, or you just don't really know what kind of energy you're receiving always. So that's something that I've worked on, and I think I do a pretty good job of. I get a lot of really great feedback from the clients that I've assisted.
Yeah, definitely. And so you had mentioned you work with 7 different practices. We won't out who those people are, but you work with predominantly therapy practices.
Yes.
And you said you've worked with, or you do work with a nutritionist. What do you notice is kind of the difference, if there is any?
I think the biggest difference is my educational background and understanding of the topics. As of course, eating disorders and disordered eating and nutrition and things like that do also play into the therapy psych realm, but eating disorders are usually something that you have to specialize in to really get that information. So I've been spending some time educating myself further on the topic, just so I feel confident in my answers when people are asking me questions. So that's the biggest challenge that I've noticed in differences, but everything else is pretty much the same in terms of, the process.
Yeah. And I noticed from just kind of things that you post in your social media and your bio that you sent over, you make things happen, don't you?
That is, that's what they pay me the big bucks for.
I want to hear a little bit about your undergrad with your engagement with NAMI. That really stuck out to me. I'm curious if you could shed some light on what that experience was, and just for those listening who don't know what NAMI is, and just kind of
absolutely
how that unfolded.
So it is the National Alliance Against Mental Illness. It's an organization that helps provide like education and support to a lot of different mental health concerns. There was not a chapter at my undergrad when I got there, but me and a couple of other classmates had worked on creating a chapter. So it was brand new when I was on my way out, but it was a pretty cool experience because I felt like I was helping bring something helpful to the school, because I've heard some of the people may have spoken with the school therapist, but that was really the only mental health resource I was aware of at school. Outside of maybe talking to one of the psych professors or your I can't remember what they call it, but the person that like supervises your schooling. But yeah, there wasn't a ton of resources, and I thought that it was important to create a space for that and normalize mental illness because of how common it is and how a lot of people really feel shame around having a mental health concern. So that was I think that's the main things that was important to me with that.
Are those the people you're referring to? Are those the academic advisors?
Yes,
the other
that
professionals?
was the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They're one. I loved my academic advisor, but I wasn't about to confide in him about my deep dark secrets. I know that.
No, I was my advisor was the assistant head to the psych department, and then the head of the psych department was my advisor for my senior project. And that was quite an experience because I remember like there was one day in class, I know this is a sidebar, but I was like twirling my hair and looking out the window, like having ADHD for me, like when I learn something, I need to learn it one way, not 2 or 3 different ways, because then I start confusing myself. So he was explaining something in a different way. I tuned out, and he asked me to stay after class, and I was like, oh man, what did I do? And he just looked at me, he's like, are you bored? And I was like, no, like, not at all. But I'd never had someone, notice that I'm not paying attention and be like, genuinely care if I'm bored.
Yeah.
I thought that was, there was a lot to be said about that.
Yeah, it's that's how I got linked up with my first therapist. Is I was practicing the field. I was about 7 years in, and another clinician who was much further along than me, she pulled me aside one day, and she just asked her, "Are you okay?" Yeah, and I was like, "Yeah, I don't think so."
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, it's like, I need to slow down. But without those good people, we often don't stop to even think to stop to look at our mental health, or just kind of like how much is on our plate.
Exactly.
Which I think is another good tie-in, and why I was excited to have you on is like to have an assistant, whether it's a business or just an assistant in your practice. I mean, I can't vouch for it enough. It's really, I'm not a insurance guy.
No.
I could do it.
It's hard.
I could figure it out, but having that backup, so that once I submit it, I know it's good. I know that I have someone I can talk to about it if I've messed something up. All that kind of stuff is really helpful, and I'm sure that's a godsend for the people you work with.
Certainly. I will say insurance is one area that I don't really delve into. I have a lot of great resources where I can help outsource that, just because it is such a specialized skill set and knowledge area that I would need to take a fair amount of time off to make sure I fully understood that before I could start offering it.
Yeah, and I think that's another a benefit of having an assistant is they can be that intermediary to get you to, because I think you hit a nail on the head that the insurance side of things are such a nuanced, annoying part, of the whole process. So having someone who knows how to get in touch with the right people, and having a team, because the team I work with, there's no one person, and I think that, well, I mean, as I'm just listening to you, it sounds like that's how you kind of network this out. It's like you are the intermediary that knows the places to go.
Yes, oftentimes. And if I don't, I am great at research. But it is certainly one of the things that I do a lot is, connecting things and connecting people. And that itself can be a difficult task, especially when you're talking to a lot of people who have just experienced the worst thing that has ever happened to them in their entire lives. And this is the first time they're reaching out about it. I might be the very first person they've ever told. So it's crazy, because a lot of clients I've spoken to have been like, thank you so much for being so kind and, spending this time. And I'm like, who have you been talking to? I'm genuinely concerned for some of the practices out there that maybe use like call centers and things like that, because it really takes out a big layer of personability and connection, which people are seeking.
Yeah, I think that's happening a lot these days in the mental health field, with all of like the online therapy businesses that start, and they're kind of like, they are those insurance hubs, and it does take the personal touch out. Some people, they've got to go that way because it's the only place that's going to bill their insurance. But it's interesting because therapists, we're not marketers. We don't know what we're doing in those realms typically. We're not networkers. We are clinicians. And it's interesting because I think these businesses have come in and kind of swept up the whole bottom. And then there's the people that have been in the field, but also people who've been in therapy and refer and that kind of stuff, like to loved ones and friends that get that kind of like business side of therapy is a little sketch.
Yeah. And I think that is, one of the beauties of having an assistant. Is being able to pass some of that off and being able to genuinely just focus on being a clinician. I think that's one of the biggest things I do for my group practices I support, because a lot of these clinicians are still pretty early on in their career. They're either a student or holding a limited permit, and they've got a lot on their plate trying to get their hours. So they don't need to be emailing back and forth about what the issue is between their insurance and why their claims are being denied. And they also don't necessarily always have a ton of time to be back and forth about rescheduling and things like that in a super timely manner because they're in session all day.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that I think is also really helpful, because I know, like, when I'm ready to become a clinician, I'm going to want to be able to pass off some of this administrative stuff to someone else too.
Yeah, it sounds like you'll have the inside track too of just how all that
I'll
works.
just hand them a guide.
Yeah.
Be like, here you go.
Yeah.
This is what we need.
What would you say is kind of like the percentage breakdown in an average business day for you between interface with a client and interface with a clinician? Like is it 50-50, or do you find that more clients are reaching out to you, or?
It's more client facing, or prospective lead facing, I should say. It really depends on the practice, and like what their scheduling structure is. So for instance, some practices schedule on recurring weekly schedule no matter what. Some practices kind of schedule as they go.
Yeah.
And the ones that kind of schedule as they go require more client contact to get people consistently on the schedule.
Yeah.
So in those scenarios, I'm probably talking to a clinician a lot more.
Yeah.
But in scenarios where I'm able to find a spot and that's the client's spot, there's a little bit less back and forth, unless if there's, a question or an issue with scheduling, or, hey, I can't change the status of my appointment. Can you help me?
Yeah, gotcha. If an individual therapist was going to reach out to you, they found your information and was like, oh, everyday assistant, and they contacted you, what would be the benefit for them?
Yeah.
And just kind of how would you explain it to them if you were on a call, trying to work with them and get their practice going?
Of course. So I actually work with 2 solo practitioners. And I think one of the large benefits is, like I was mentioning before, being able to focus on just the clinical side of the work. And it also frees up time to be able to do side projects. So coaching, for instance, I know that's kind of a popular side gig for a lot of therapists as well, that it allows more time for them to focus on coaching or marketing their coaching, or writing a book, or getting ready for a presentation. So it's that time is the big one. Time.
Truly.
But other than that, I think for, in particular, the one practice owner I'm thinking of, so she facilitates over 10 different support groups herself. That's a lot of people reaching out a lot of time. They all need consultation, pre-screening. Their paperwork needs to have an eye on it to make sure everything's done. They need to be added into the system and set up for the group and make sure that everything's all good there. That is a lot of time.
It is.
And it's not time it's money too, because that's time that you could be working with your individual clients, your couples clients, or networking or consulting with other therapists in the field.
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing this and growing this platform and bringing people in to have these conversations if I didn't have individuals on the back end doing some of the kind of interfacing for me. Once I show up, I do my session, I do my clinical note, and I turn it over to the team. And without that, I wouldn't be doing these things. And so I know there are clinicians, because you guys reach out to me after we do the show on Fridays, life coaches. I'm telling you, if you want more time, one of the things I get a lot is like they want to write books and they want to do podcasts like this. So I get a lot of those kind of questions. And so if you guys are watching tonight, truly reach out to Devan. She is working with clinicians, not just in Texas, but she is currently expanding in Texas. So if you're a Texas clinician, she's ready to go. But if you're, I know we're broadcasting worldwide. So if you're listening, all right, Devan is your person.
I'm your girl. My hours are intentionally able to accommodate both the East and the West Coast and Central. So I'm happy to work with you no matter where you're from. Being back in Texas, I want to, expand my roots here a little bit more specifically.
With that, so you carve out kind of like you start a little later here on the Central Standard Time and end a little later, or do you?
So I actually start earlier than I did on the East Coast.
Gotcha.
I usually start my day around 10 a.m. and I work until about 6 or 7 p.m. most days. Okay. Right now, that's perfect for my West Coast practice because in the evening there's not a lot going on for that practice. So ending around like 3 or 4 p.m. their time works great.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I know you were mentioning that there's all kinds of plans to grow it, and so maybe that's where we can transition. Is we were talking about the TCA conference that's coming up, and you said it's Dallas, right?
Yeah, it's in Dallas this year. I don't know if it is every year. It's my first time attending, but it's at the end of October.
And at the end of October, if someone's at the TCA conference and they walk up to Devan's booth, what can they expect?
They can expect a bubbly mess of sunshine.
Okay.
I'm definitely someone who will start up a conversation and kind of keep you there. I'm so curious about the people that I'm helping and what they do. So I will be asking you about your specialty, what got you into this field. Make sure that it's something that we're both inspired by and can get behind. Yeah. And make sure that there's some common ground as well, because I think that's important in a working relationship. But mostly just, be ready to tell me a bit about yourself and what you do. And if you have questions, let me know. I usually have an answer, and if I don't, I can find one.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in, especially on the business end of things, but really just in life, like inspired connections, you know, and a real great way to do that is to have common ground. We don't all have to believe the same things, but when we have similar morals, values, belief systems, that we just enjoy, it's a lot easier to connect and build things that way.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. It's commonality, and it creates normalization and comfortability.
Yeah, so for the individuals listening to this, what are just kind of some in the field that like really get you going, that really you enjoy?
That I enjoy?
Topics, backgrounds, like what do you find yourself passionate about?
A lot.
Yeah.
I have at least one conversation a day that will give me chills or goosebumps or, inspire me to do something a little different. I know, like, an instance that's coming to mind is, there's a woman who had experienced a pretty awful sexual trauma, and she was needing lower cost resources, and I went and found resources, funding through the state that would help her be able to attend what she was looking for. I'm sorry, can you ask me the question again?
Yeah, just topics. If someone was listening and they're like, this is hypothetical, but they're on the fence and they have their phone right now and they're like, I want to call Devan, but I want to make sure that we both enjoy the same things.
Right, okay. So a few other areas of my interest. I really enjoy sex therapy and sexual-based concerns. I find that to be really interesting. And there's, a wide array of topics that can come up within that realm. I also am really interested in like couples therapy, LGBTQ couples specifically, just because of course every couple has their own unique concerns, but I think they even tend to get a bit more unique within the LGBTQ realm.
Yeah, I've found that in my 12 years. I have a few gentlemen that I work with on Tuesdays and back to back, and their relationships are, the dynamics are a little different. It's not like a traditional heterosexual relationship. It's fun to work with because you get to see what something different looks like that's healthy, that works. And I think there's a lot of people floating out there in that world too, that they feel different. They feel like their dynamics are weird because of some of the fluctuations in LGBT relationship, and it's like I share with them, and like when I talk about these things as well with others, it's like, don't feel weird, you know. It's like the world, the landscape in relationships is a ever-changing conversation, and especially in our culture, there's a lot of healthy ways to do it, and the way you're doing it with intervention, right, to process through it, you may find that actually it really is working for you guys. But when you watch it on TV and all the media tells you that it's different or weird, that can make you feel weird, you know.
No, certainly. I also I agree with that, but I also really am passionate about like social justice and intersectional care. A lot of the practices I support are actually, all of my practices that I support in some capacity are a minority of sorts, whether they come from a different cultural background or are a member of the LGBTQ community. I think that it's really important to understand how someone's identity can inform their worldview, just because that can vary so much, and depending on certain facets of someone's identity, it can really change things for their therapeutic approach.
Yeah. You feel like when you kind of venture back into the clinical realm that those are areas of focus that you'll be drawn to?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm definitely interested in working with couples. I think a lot of, not a lot, but about half the therapists that I know are nervous to work with couples because it's not just one client, it's two. And there tends to be conflict in couples therapy.
All the time.
I am a person who really likes a challenge, and I want to feel challenged and inspired in my work. I want to be forced to come up with creative solutions, and I think in working with populations like that, I would be.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the creative solutions recently? Right, I'm going to put you on the spot with this one. But creative solutions that you've helped clinicians find in their practice.
Okay.
That's kind of a skirt.
Creative solutions for clinicians in their practice. So I think one of the things, you'll have to give me a second to think
absolutely.
on this, honestly.
Yeah, put you on the spot.
Yeah. There is, I think a lot of the things that I do, I have to use some creativity for. For instance, identifying on a hybrid schedule in certain EHRs when they're going to be in person and when they're going to be virtual. Or helping therapists maximize their schedule. Oftentimes, when you've been at it a while, you have people fall into their places, and then someone goes bi-weekly, and then they're monthly, and then you've got all of these random spaces that you're like, how did that get there?
Yeah.
I oftentimes will sit down with the therapists that I help, and I'm like, all right, let's talk about your caseload and their needs, and figure out where we can make this puzzle a little more pretty, and open up more consistent spots for new clients.
So you manage, for some, you manage their calendar.
All
of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. The whole thing.
Nice.
Most of my clinicians do not need to do much with their calendar.
Oh, good.
And some of them don't really know how to work it either. Sure. And they're like, I need this to happen. Can you make that happen? And I'm like, got you.
Yeah, good. So you found yourself in quite a support role for these clinicians out there.
Yes, and a little bit of tech support sometimes too when it comes to like simple practice using. Like I found some interesting workarounds that I didn't know I needed.
What would you say to a clinician that has stepped into private practice and they know they need help, but they're scared to reach out to an assistant? Maybe they're telling themselves they could do it on their own. What would you say to them?
Well, I would say you need to be honest with yourself about your needs and your bandwidth.
Yeah, you'll fit right in when you become a therapist. Yeah.
But yeah, that would be the first thing, is just really being honest with yourself and making sure that you're not stretching yourself too thin, because burnout is a quick and you don't always see it coming.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to not only that, but identify what tasks you would want to give away and things that you don't like doing so much or you struggle with working into your schedule. Identifying those sort of things would be kind of step one, because I know in my experience, when there is someone who hasn't had an assistant before, it's very difficult to kind of let go of the reins a bit, and I can relate to that. Like I also struggle to do that when I'm getting assistance as well. Like it's your baby.
Yeah.
It's hard to let someone else manage. So I want to first normalize that, because it's a normal fear. It's a common fear, and it's something that can be worked through.
Yeah, and I think a good point too that you're highlighting is, like, as a young clinician, having some of these supports in the way of an assistant. I think a lot of the barriers for me in the beginning was like, oh man, I'm making money now, I don't want to spend that money, like all those kind of things. And what I always like to tell young clinicians is, like, if you're on the fence about that stuff, the peace of mind, the time you're going to save by bringing in someone like you, Devan, is you're going to make that money back tenfold. Because like you were saying earlier, you're going to be able to do something like this, like start a podcast, you're going to be able to write a book, you're going to be able to go speak at more conferences, you may be able to go and have the time to be a professor at a school that you always wanted to do, because someone is helping you manage the pieces that may take you an extra 10 or 15 hours during the week.
Yeah.
So you may even be able to see one or two more clients on your caseload. There's quite a few different ways that could work itself out.
Yeah, no, these are all really great points and things that I'm often doing, is helping create space for these extra things. It's as it is important as a therapist to remain active in the field and in your education, and you kind of have to have time for that.
Yeah CEUs, but also I guess I never in the beginning anticipated how much extra research. It's like a client comes in, and I've been doing this a long time, and still it'll be something I've worked with for years and years, and they'll bring something up and say, you know what, I need to go read about that. Maybe it's been 6 years since I've worked with someone who struggled with this symptom, or it's like all those little things where if I had to deal with all the things my assistant does, I'd be doing all the research over there, and then maybe with 10 or 15 minutes, I'd have to go and read something real quick. Instead, I can take my time and digest it and then treat the client.
Yeah, no, and that's the biggest thing. Like, I imagine, at least as a therapist, you probably feel a really, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, you really want to help the people that you're seeing.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you've got to have the energy, you've got to have the time, you've got to have the bandwidth and the education and the means to be able to do so. And half of that battle is asking for help when you need it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I've harped on this a few times tonight, but if you're a clinician or a life coach or a nutritionist or a doctor, ask for help. Right, and here's your help.
I'm right here.
Yeah. So, as individuals reach out to you, let's do this. You started in September, and already you have 7 different types of clinicians working with you. What are kind of like
more than 7 clinicians?
Well, yeah, it's 7 practices.
Yes.
Where do you see this going? Like, what's just